All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this next interview in the series, I am absolutely overjoyed to welcome someone I've known for the better part of 20 years, but this is the first time we've actually been face to face together. It's my pleasure to welcome my guest, Mr. Craig Gray. Craig, thank you for being here, sir.
Howdy, Joel. Yeah, I remember the first emails I got from you were about Rick, actually.
Yes, yes. That was for a book I've been working on about Rick for, well, since that time.
Yeah, 20 years.
Yeah, well, books are a whole other conversation. But we'll certainly talk about Rick and a lot of other topics for those viewers who may be new to Craig's music. He's a longtime musician. First started making a name for himself in the 70s in San Francisco via the band Negative Trend. He worked with Rick, which we'll talk about in a bit. For many, many years, Craig was a member of Toiling Midgets, one of the classic underground bands of the 80s, and currently plays in a band called Lazy Giants. And I figure we'll start there because there's a lot to sort of unpack with Lazy Giants. The band has an album out that just came out recently called Toiling Days Are Over.
Right.
And there's a little bit to get into with that because Lazy Giants is, I guess we can call it kind of a rebranding of Toiling Midgets as indicated in the title. So let's start there. What led to Lazy Giants coming to existence after so many years of being part of Toiling Midgets?
Well, the fact that we weren't able to get gigs uh, under the old name because the M word is now considered derogatory to small people. So in certain places, promoters wouldn't book us because of the name.
Mhm.
So if we wanted, and it was starting to get pushback from younger people, listeners, I suppose, about the name as well. So it's like, okay, I get it. Okay, I gotcha. I hear you. You know, and I still want to play. And the most obvious way to have a connection was just to switch the name around, which is something I'd done earlier on with my brother. Use Lazy Giants. There's a connection there, even though it's kind of silly and stupid, but there's a connection nonetheless. Um, but yeah, because we wanted to keep going, and when we signed with the label, we were still TM, and then we told them we were changing the name, and they were fine with it. They were fine with doing that. They thought it was a good idea. So if we can sell more music, yes, we'll do it. However we can do it.
And Lazy Giants just recently, just in the last few days, wrapped up a European tour. Uh,
Yeah.
how did that go for you guys out there?
It was a lot of fun. Good and bad as they always are, but interesting nonetheless. Some places were amazing. Um, yeah, it was mostly like Germany, Czech Republic, Italy, Netherlands, Belgium. 20 shows in 25 days? Yeah. Yeah, I'm still tired. But yeah, it was interesting because you got a mix of people, old and new, which was great. Actually, in Italy, at this small place near a town called Piacenza, in a place called Kelly's Pub that we ended up playing. This dude came up and he said he was in a punk rock band in the 80s, and they heard Tooth and Nail and they started doing a cover of Mercenaries. And that when people said, "Oh, we like that song," they said, "Yes, yes, that's our song." So yes, he copped to claiming that my work was his work. Which, so, but yeah, it was kind of funny. But he came to the show, so it was an interesting little thing. Interesting story to hear about your music.
Right, right. And, and those are only the things you can really encounter when you're on the road.
Yeah, no, nowhere else you find that stuff.
Yeah. Um, in terms of who else comprises the band these days, I know you and Paul Hood.
Yeah,
You two have worked together since 1980,
yeah,
roughly.
about 43 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So you two have really been the mainstays of what was Toiling Midgets. Uh, who else comprises the current version of the band?
Current version is, of course, there's Paul on the other guitar. Uh, got Daniel Cherney, who plays bass and sings. He played bass with Lydia Lunch for a tour. She played some stuff with Florence and the Machine for a while, but he's in Berlin. He's a Czech musician. He's kind of an all-around musician. Really, really, really cool dude. And then there's Daniel Benjamin, who is a drummer who we met through Gordon Raphael from the Strokes from when he lived in Berlin. And when we first went over there looking for, to do some shows, and we needed a drummer and he was around. So yeah, but yeah, they're both Berlin based, which is good for playing in Europe. And also a lot of shit going on in Berlin. So, I mean, our shows in Berlin were both the shows we did in Berlin were really good. So yeah. And our label that we're signed to is also German. They're from Hamburg. So
How do you guys work out the logistics of being in a band with that sort of
it
distance?
ain't easy, but then we just had the pandemic. So everybody had to learn how to do that.
Right.
So those are kind of, I mean, Paul hasn't been in the same town as me for a long time, and we've still managed to keep things going. Even though for a while in Seattle we were using some, I mean, in San Francisco, some experimental software so Paul could play with us while he was in his basement in Seattle. And we did a couple of shows where Paul was in Seattle in his basement, and we were in San Francisco playing live, and he was playing through a laptop. It was very, very weird because there's all this noise, but no Paul. So yeah, it was interesting. But I no, we it's the internet trading tracks back and forth. I go over there now every few months, spend a couple months in Berlin, and we work. I mean, like I was just there for 4 months. I went in July, and I was there up to the end of the tour, which ended on 18th of November, I think. Yeah, in Berlin. And that was yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, we played with two Russian bands, both from St. Petersburg. One had been there for 3 years, and the other one had just come. They're both getting away from the shit
Mm.
in Russia. But yeah, a lot of Russian, a lot of people from everywhere in Berlin. That's what's very cool about it. Yeah,
Well,
man.
with the history of Toiling Midgets, and we'll dive into this as we get rolling, but um, you and Paul have been, like I said, you've been the mainstays, but there have been a lot of really great musicians involved in the band over the years. One thing I always enjoy about Toiling Midgets and now Lazy Giants, if we kind of put those together, despite all the changes in the lineup, it always kind of sounds like Toiling Midgets because obviously it's you and Paul, and you guys have a definable sound. Um, that said, what do the new guys bring in to the band that perhaps wasn't there before and adds to what you're looking to do now?
Well, I mean, since Tom died, we haven't really been a band, and now we're actually a band again, which is, I mean, just playing these shows, these 20 shows together was really exciting, and we did some recording, but yeah, it actually the whole band element and also the energy of the youth, I mean, we're a couple of old guys, and sometimes you got to kick ass, and it helps to have people around who have much more energy than you to help you, get up, get going. But also they're just, uh have really varied musical backgrounds, Daniel Czerny, the bass player singer, he's also in a dance band, a disco. They call themselves a live disco band, but yeah, they're just silly dance music in Berlin. And then Daniel Benjamin has like a pop singer career.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and also has a small label, nonprofit label. So yeah, and then that whole connection to Europe, because that was not a place we ever connected to yet. I know that we were popular in Europe. I mean, a lot of Steve and Russ sold fairly well, and so did Sun, and we played an in-store in Hamburg, and it was nothing but gray hairs. Most of our gigs were pretty varied, but that was the one where it was like 90% gray hairs. And I know those were people who bought that record in 1980s, so in the 80s. But yeah, and they would, so it's nice, and they were all like over the moon to see us because it's something they thought that would not happen. So, that, and I like playing it. Your audiences are appreciative, and clubs take care of you, even though it's getting harder and harder, just like everywhere else. Clubs are closing and all that shit. But yeah, there's that whole, the European entrance that we never had before that these guys are totally connected to.
And isn't that amazing that 43 years into it, suddenly there's this new audience that is embracing what you're doing. It has to be exciting to, see that happen when, 43 years ago, Lord knows you would never have thought that would have been the case.
No, no, I am, and 43 years ago, yeah. The only time we ever tried to go anywhere with Ricky, it was yeah, it was an adventure to say the least. But yeah, no, it never would have happened. Not in this way, anyways. But it is interesting to be like 65 and then you're signing a record contract, going, what the fuck? Getting stuff that never happened in my 20s. I mean, it's a good label. It's a real label. They spend money. They have people who work on the record and things and stuff. And you say, could you send a record? And guess what? Somebody sends a record.
Yeah. Yeah. I got one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's kind of blurry in my filter here, but
Yeah,
um, yeah, it's really exciting to see where things are now. And you've mentioned a couple of names in your previous answers. We should mention Tom is Tom Mallon, who was a longtime collaborator of yours who sadly passed away, um, as well as Ricky Williams, who we'll get into a bit. I figure what we'll do is why don't we kind of go all the way back,
right.
and then we'll kind of circle back to where we are now. Um, to the very best of my knowledge, your life as a working musician begins around 1977 with the band Grand Mal, right? That
Yeah,
was the first proper band.
yeah.
Now, did Grand Mal record, or was that a little bit too early to make that happen?
Yeah, no, we didn't even do that many gigs. I mean, it was, it's basically was Negative Trend except Don Vinyl singing, the first version of Negative Trend. But yeah, Don Vinyl singing, and handful of gigs maybe. And the very first one was even without our real drummer. The very first gig we played, Danny Furious from the Avengers played drums for like 6 songs.
Mm.
I was at a basement party, but then we did, I don't know. I think we opened for the Dead Boys. Maybe played with the Sleepers a couple times. Did a couple more shows, but then that was it. Then, but let's see. Yeah, 2 months maybe was Grandma's thing because by September Roz was in town, and and we started working with Roz not long after he got there. So
And that would, of course, be Roz Rezabek,
yes,
the original singer for Negative Trend.
yeah,
And, we should mention too, the bass player for
yeah,
most of Negative Trend's existence was Will Shatter, who ended up part of Flipper,
yeah,
down the line. Um, and I guess, the version with Roz was the first proper Negative Trend lineup. Didn't last terribly long. Um, but there, people still refer to that initial lineup as, being a real great one. And I know back in the 90s, I remember I was reading Flipside, I think it was, and there was a review for a record called Roz and Negative Trend.
yeah, yeah.
Was that an official release or was that?
No, that was something Roz did after he left Negative Trend because he just disappeared. And put out in the 90s as Negative Trend because he knew he that would sell. And it's hard to sell a Roz record when nobody really knows who Roz is. And people have a little bit of an idea who Negative Trend are. So,
Mhm.
I got him to stop doing that actually. So if you now look online, you'll find it's Roz of Negative Trend instead of Roz and Negative Trend, because not one person from the band plays on that record. I think it's the Lude might be the backing
Oh,
band.
is it? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not even sure because I was where did I come? I came back from the UK or somewhere in the 90s, or where was I? It doesn't matter where I was, but I came back to San Francisco and I'm looking at records and I found it. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? I'm looking at it going, what? I don't know these songs. This isn't us. And then of course our picture was on there. So yeah, I had to get him to stop doing that. That was not a happy thing. But it was also put out by the same guy who put out the deaf, I mean the miners benefit CD.
Right, right, right.
Yeah. Which is pretty much the only recording of that version of Negative Trend, but is a terrible recording nonetheless.
Well,
Yeah.
a Negative Trend recording, which is not terrible, um, came via the second lineup of the band, which at that point you had Steve DePace on drums, who would, of course, with Will do Flipper down the line. And is it Mikkel or Michael?
Michael.
Michael Waters on vocals. And you guys put out the 4-song EP, Negative Trend EP, in 78.
Yeah.
Which is, a classic of its era, certainly. And that's where, Mercenaries was first heard, and I Got Power, and
No, I Got Power wasn't on that. That was the next record.
oh,
That was the Posh Boy record.
that's right. Forgive me.
Yeah.
Right.
No, the first one was Mercenaries, Meat House, How You Feeling, and Black and Red.
Yes. Now, Black and Red, I need to talk to you about because one of my favorite, what I would consider original era punk songs. One of the greatest guitar riffs of all time, frankly, in my opinion. And lyrically, it's what you'd want from a song called Black and Red.
Yeah, right.
Um, what can you tell me about composing that song? Because that was
Uh,
your moment in a lot of ways.
I yeah, it's pretty vivid. I wrote the lyrics on a back of a yellow flyer. I remember the flyer was yellow. I've probably been up for a couple days because we tended to do that then, stay up for a few days at a time, one way or another. And that yeah, I mean, I just remember sitting in this room by myself. I don't know where my girlfriend was, and I have no idea what day it was. I remember the house. I remember the room that I was in was totally red. The walls were red, the ceiling was red, the floor was red. And actually, the other room on the other side was black with the silver ceiling. So we had the black room and the red room. But that's not where the title came from, but it just occurred to me. um, but yeah, and then the riff, one of those things, you're just sitting playing guitar and you do something, you go, oh, okay. And then it just kind of happened. Yeah, I was just sitting in the living room of that house, fucking around on the guitar and played that first bit. And then the second bit just came right after it. And yeah, it was one of those ones that just kind of fell together. Yeah. Yeah, I do remember writing that one pretty well. Most of those songs actually, because that house, the place where we lived then was pretty memorable.
Mm.
It was,
And I know from talking to a few different musicians from that era out in San Francisco. Um, Over the last year, I've been in touch with most of the Mutants, for example. I've interviewed most of them. Obviously there were, the Kennedys were around at that point. And how would you best define the San Francisco scene at that time, say circa 77, 78?
well, it was more of it was really varied for one, because you had things like Tuxedo Moon and Zev on one end, and then, Negative Trend and well, the Nuns and the Avengers on the other end. I mean, there's a lot in between there too. There's Mutants and various other bands. But yeah, it was all very varied. There was no formula yet. So you could pretty much do what you wanted, you know. Um, the idea of playing a synth was not a bad idea. Tuxedo Moon, for example. I mean, they happened at the exact same time everything else did there, so I think punk rock is a bit of a narrow definition of what was going on in San Francisco at the time. It was more of an art rock scene in a way, with heavy influence. Well, if you're gonna call it a punk rock scene with heavy art damage.
Right.
You know,
Right. Absolutely.
that's what a lot of people used to say about San Francisco, is it's art damaged. So, you know, and yeah, I've carried that with me pretty much my whole musical career. I mean, people forget it is an art, and you don't have to be what's popular or what's cool to do it. So yeah.
Right. And the EP kind of comes back around every few years. I know it was in
Yeah, it's fun.
2005, Henry Rollins enters the picture
Yeah.
because Henry reissued that EP as a CD
Right.
on his label. And then a few years later, Superior Viaduct put it out as a vinyl reissue. So it seems to kind of come around every few years. And Negative Trend as a band seems to re-enter the conversation every few years. We're talking about a band that was active 77, 78, 79. Why do you think Negative Trend still has such a resonance with a certain audience even now?
I, it's kind of weird. I don't know, because when you compare it to punk rock singles of the time, it's a bit slower than most of them. It's kind of in the way that the Sleepers record is a bit slower than most of them. You know, uh, uh, I also think it's like the Sleepers record in the way that it's the songwriting itself. It's not formula punk rock songwriting.
Right.
That I think there were a couple of San Francisco bands that were very much into that, but most of them weren't. Most of that stuff went on in LA, which was, where you had a lot of cartoon punk rock bands and stuff. Um, but it was, yeah, I think the songwriting is going to come down to, it's always got to be the songwriting. I mean, if it's shitty songs, they're just not going to come around every few years.
Right. Right. Exactly.
But also, this is around this time I started hanging around with Michael Belfer a lot,
Right.
and we were playing together a lot. So we were influencing each other's writing styles. He actually told me when he was writing Flying, he was trying to write a Negative Trend song.
Mm.
which is funny, because like dude, that song does not sound like a Negative Trust song, but there you go.
Yeah, he was just such an innovative guitarist.
Yeah.
You know, I, I have a whole thing with the Sleepers. Very quick aside, I years ago on my website, I pieced together what I could as far as a history on the Sleepers
Yeah.
because there was no like zero information about them at that time. And I did it to sort of put a flare up like, hey, Living Sleepers members, there's a guy who wants to write about you. Come my way. I'd love to get the story right. And I heard from a couple of them. And with one in particular, was like, yeah, let's do something. And then he kind of disappeared. And then it happened with someone else in the band. They're like, yeah, let's do something. And then they kind of went away. 2, 3 years later, years after the fact, I get like a 2 sentence email from Michael Belfer. Thank you so much for the Sleepers article. It was really great. And I'm like, oh my God, I wrote it back. I said, do you want to, can we do something? No reply. So I'm glad he wrote his book before he passed, obviously, because that story is out there. But in a way, I really like the fact that I can't get a story about the Sleepers done. Like they're that mysterious in a way. It's
Yeah, his book, I was there for a lot of that shit in his book. And yeah, that's one of the things about Michael is shit was never Michael's fault. It's like, what? Why aren't you my friend anymore? All I did was sell all your stuff and fuck your girlfriend. Why aren't you my friend anymore? Like, seriously, dude? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I had, yeah, I got to meet the Hells Angels because of Michael. So, yeah. So, I mean, he left out a lot in the books anyway.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Um, Negative Trend. You guys do the EP. Shortly thereafter, you're looking for a new singer, and that's when you connect with Rick Elrick,
right, right.
who of course was an F word, the first LA punk band to have a full-length album. Posh Boy put that out. How did the initial connection with Rick take place?
Well, we'd seen them play the Mabuhay a few times. I think we'd met Rick once or twice. Um, and I seem to remember us sending a message through someone who was going to LA and knew him. I don't remember who, that we were looking for a singer and we'd like him to try. Um, yeah, I seem to remember it being by messages, like, oh, you're going to LA? Could you get this message to Rick? Blah, blah, blah. Or we called somebody. It was all kind of, well, it was all kind of punk rock and tenuous, what I say. So and so might have called somebody, or somebody wrote somebody or something, and then what? But we finally got hooked up with him. But he came with Posh Boy, so it was kind of weird. His personal label manager kind of guy. So yeah, that was kind of strange. But yeah, but yeah, I think he came up for a, maybe a few rehearsals in the show. That was also quite difficult because he had never actually moved to San Francisco when he joined. He stayed mostly in LA. But yeah, I mean, pretty much almost immediately after we started playing, Posh Boy had us record.
Mhm.
So those recordings we did are without being together for very long. Mooney hadn't been in the band that long at that time, you know. Um, yeah, so that was, I think I wrote I Got Power because we needed another song for
Mhm.
this session. So I just went, oh fuck. And so I just wrote something. And yeah, so that was Yeah. It didn't last that long with Rick. Oh, he did come up for a while because we did start some rehearsing when we started to do some songs. Like, because once we've been together for a while, and we were rehearsing. Must have been up in the city because we had this rehearsal place down Third Street in San Francisco. We go to, and that's when we started doing songs like Destiny,
Hmm.
which we originally did with Rick. I think there was one other Midget song that we probably originally did with Rick, but also Jonathan was still playing bass then, and him and Rick, Rick had problems with Jonathan's musicianship, so which is, you know, it's hard to get four guys to get along all the time.
Well, when Rick first got involved with Negative Trend, the lineup was, if I'm not mistaken, it was yourself, Rick, Will was still on bass, and you brought in Tim Mooney from the Sleepers to
Yeah,
play drums. And that was the lineup that was on those recordings, which ended up in a couple of different places. One was the Tooth and Nail compilation, and then the second place, or a second place, was the Beach Boulevard compilation that Posh Boy put out. Out of curiosity, if I'm not mistaken, Tooth and Nail credits it to Negative Trend. Posh Boy's Beach Boulevard compilation credits it to Rick L. Rick.
right.
Why the difference there in?
Well, the Tooth and Nail stuff is actually us playing, and then the Beach Boulevard stuff is actually some of it is session guys,
Oh,
because some of those songs got redone for the movie. Oh, what is that movie called? Creep Show. Because there's two Negative Trend Rico Rick songs in that movie, and they were Mercenaries and I Got Power, and they were re-recorded by some LA session musicians for that movie. And also with that stuff, Tooth and Nail came out, much to my surprise. That stuff was on there. And then when Beach Boulevard came out, well, the first Rick L. Rick single came out, I was like, what the fuck is this shit? And then Beach Boulevard, I mean, Posh Boy didn't tell us about it, didn't tell me about it. So I was quite surprised when they came out. I probably signed something that said Posh Boy could have them till the end of time or whatever, who knows what you signed when you're 19 and stupid punk rock kid. Oh, you're gonna put on my record? Awesome. Oh yeah, I'll sign your piece of paper.
right,
You
right.
know, which is pretty much how it went for me when I was that age, so.
You said Creep Show, just to make sure, and not to correct you unnecessarily, but was it at Nightmares?
Oh, no, was it Nightmares?
I
Yes, you're
think
right.
I think it
Nightmares.
was, yeah.
It was Nightmares. Emilio Estevez,
Right.
who is Nightmares. When I just have to think about my royalty checks for 83 cents. Yes.
Wow, 83. I think my latest was like 76. So rock and roll.
Oh no, lately they've been even worse. What did I got one? I haven't had one for a while because I'm in Canada and I haven't reached the limit of when they send them out, the amount of money before they send it to me. But I got one. It was 21 cents. No, 27 or 21. But they took out taxes, so it was only 19 cents.
Ah, well, I don't mean to brag, Craig, but I made 40 bucks on Spotify since 2021.
Wow. Whoa, dude.
On
And what he just cashed out for an amazing amount of money, the dude who never wrote a song or ever released one, the guy who runs Spotify.
right, right.
Richard, every dude on there.
It's nuts, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy.
Well, but yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. 65-year-old guys can still get out and get on the road and sit in the back of a shitty car for a month. But yeah, no. But yeah, it was fun. So, Negative Trend, man. Rick was something else. Yeah. I actually saw him. Toiling Midgets played a mall in south of LA in the 90s. 90s? Yeah, and Rick showed up
Hmm.
not long before he passed. Would have been
Wow.
not long. And that was the last time I saw him, actually.
Yeah, I missed my chance of knowing him in person because I have played a couple of times over the years in a band called Electric Frankenstein.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, you know, because they've covered Negative Trend.
Yeah.
Um, and Rick was the singer with them for a bit. They did a couple records together. And my first time playing in that band happened about 6 months after Rick had gone back to California because he was only
Right.
going to like a guest singer for a bit, you know.
Right.
So I kind of missed him by about 6 months, but um, you know, being an Electric Frankenstein is what kind of got me to really kind of know some of that material you had done with Rick back then. Um, and we should mention too, you mentioned Jonathan, that is No Smoke King,
Yeah,
his
yeah, yeah.
stage name, and he was the bass player after Will.
Yes, he was.
Um, so, you know, things don't, I guess things kind of run their course with Rick. And then the remaining three members of that incarnation of Negative Trend kind of begin as an instrumental band, which leads into Toiling Midgets, right? That's kind of how it unfolded.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Rick didn't want to come up to San Francisco to play. We did this gig uh at Grove Street, and Rick was supposed to come up and he never showed. So um that's the last time we saw him or heard from him. And so from we played that show. Well, I tried to sing one song, felt like such an idiot. I just ended up turning my back to the audience, and Tony Midges kind of started that night. But our first official show as Toiling Midgets was as a three-piece opening for the Dills in the winter of 79, early 80. And Paul was at that show, as a matter of fact, uh, and would be joining later that week. So,
Mm.
yeah, the first show was instrumental, and we actually did we do any Negative Trend songs? I think we might have. We didn't try to sing any, but um, yeah, that was that was the Roosevelt, yeah, opening for the Dills. But yeah, yeah, Rick could have been really amazing if he'd been with the right people and some really good songwriters. But I think he got stuck in that doing covers of his song, in a way doing covers of himself for the rest of his life. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and the last live show I saw of his, during Destiny, I Got Power, She's Flown, Black and Red, all those songs from the past. I mean, you have to really harass me to get me to play one of my old songs at the show. I
mhm.
mean, even on this tour, we only did one old midget song, or maybe two. Yeah, yeah.
So do you consider Lazy Giants a brand new band, or is
No,
it?
not really, no, because so much hasn't changed. What it is the next step of TM, so to speak.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that, that first show, 43 years ago, and still me and Paul are doing it. And yeah, that's a poof. But yeah, I mean, Paul joined, and that's when we met Tom Allen, actually, not long after Paul joined, because he was working at this sandwich shop, and he was talking about recording, and someone gave him a card of Tom's and said they'd recorded there. Paul got in touch with him, and then we ended up doing our demo in Tom's house. And from then on, he was pretty much our producer.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And when you look at the Toiling Midgets output, which of course spans decades, um, uh, largely instrumental, but
Yeah.
you've had obviously different singers over the years in different capacities. And of course, one singer you had um, happens to be one of my favorite singers of all time, um, for reasons I'll get into in a bit. But that would, of course, be Ricky Williams, originally of the Sleepers, and he was in Crime. He meets up, or doesn't meet up with you because you knew him already, but he becomes involved in Toiling Midgets. I gotta tell you, Craig, I have never heard a singer like Ricky Williams, and I never will.
No, no one ever will. There is no singer like Ricky. You know, yeah, I mean, we were recording at Tom's because he moved his studio into a good studio. We were recording some demos, and Paul ran into Ricky in the street and said, "Come on, come with me. We're in the studio." And of course, Ricky studio, of course, he's going to go. And that's kind of how he ended up joining us. Um, Paul bringing him down to the studio, and then us just ended up hanging out with him, which was a dangerous thing to do because you never knew what the fuck Ricky was going to do next. I mean, literally, I mean, he could, yeah. So hanging out with Ricky was always like he'd either end up going, "Oh God, thank God he left," or you'd be in jail, one of the two, you know. But no, but Ricky was pure instinct, just what you heard came from the deepest, darkest depths of inside Ricky. There was no filters in between that, Ricky's head and what came out of his mouth. None at all. Tom used to say watching him sing in the studio is like watching him talk to somebody.
Mm.
There's, he's talking to somebody. I don't know who it is, but there's somebody in there with him, and you're having a pretty animated discussion. So yeah, he always thought that Ricky's singing was actually a conversation, and you only heard Ricky's part of the conversation.
Mm. Yeah, when I first heard his voice, it was when I was kind of digging through all this stuff, many, many, many years ago. And I'm trying to remember if it was the Sleepers or one of your records with Ricky. I think it may have been the Sleepers. And at first listen, I thought Ricky was terrible. That
Yeah.
was my first impression. A couple months go by, I give it another try, and I'm like, that lyric is really interesting. Or, oh, the way he delivered that line was kind of from somewhere else. It wasn't expected. Third time I listened to him, I realized, oh my God, this guy's a genius,
Yeah.
you know? And I totally got into Ricky at that point. I got it. It finally clicked. I'm like, wow, this is a voice and a presence that we're not going to have again.
No, he was definitely a very unique singer and performer and just, artist, artist of the most in the term that means someone who cannot deal with the real world but is an absolute fucking genius at his art.
Yeah.
Um yeah, just I work on yeah. It was like Ricky Ricky was the one guy who never sang over the music. He always sang in the music,
Mm.
which is fucking hard to do as a singer because you have to be listening and open to those spaces where your voice will fit or with the things your voice will fit. But he did it effortlessly because it was just all instinct to him. You never saw such an instinctual singer,
Mm.
someone so just, yeah. And to have, and both him and Paul in the same band, Paul's playing was very much like Ricky's singing, and they both came from very pure places, and they're both very improvisational. So, yeah, it was awesome. And I still miss that Ricky element to things, it's because once you've worked with Ricky, it's really hard to work with any other singers. really hard because they're not Ricky.
Right. I, I've listened to his work with all the different bands so many times, but every time I listen to it, I hear something new. It's he always kind of gives something new, even if you've heard the album 100 times.
Yeah.
From my experience, there's always something I can pick up from it. We're like, oh, I didn't notice that before. There's a lot to take from the way he approached music. Because, like I said, I've never heard a singer with his phrasing, with his delivery, the sort of wavering in his approach, as
Yeah.
far as the waves of the sound, the way he'd kind of build his voice and bring it down, and you know, um,
A
especially
singer who's willing to bring his voice down, that's also, yeah. I mean, he was willing to not sing, even though sometimes you had to go, Ricky, shut the fuck up. But that's just because he was, being Ricky. So yeah. But no, I mean, it was really hard when he passed because we were just recording again with him. Shows were planned, so much was planned. And it could have, when I think about what, coulda, woulda, shoulda, but I mean, that could have been the time that broke Ricky, you
yeah,
know. The timing was right. Malin was producing,
right.
you know, you know, um, everybody was really hot on AMC. Well, then they could hear where AMC really came from when they, hear Ricky sing and
I
go, oh, that's where Eitzel stole that shit from, you know.
Well, I mean, it makes sense too, because this would have been the early 90s.
Yeah,
He could have been up there with like a Cobain, like the alternative scene was so ready for that.
yeah, no,
It's like the
I mean,
world was ready for Ricky.
yeah, it was ready for Ricky because there was enough people around. They'd seen people like that. Um, Courtney knew Ricky. Yeah, all those people knew of Ricky if they didn't know him. We'd played in Seattle with Ricky, so some of those people had seen us with Ricky. So, and that was we played there, yeah, once with Ricky. The only time he ever played up the Northwest. That was that was a nightmare. He ran out of drugs after 2 days, and then we couldn't get him to leave his motel room. He just wanted to sleep. We had to be dragged to the show in Seattle.
Mm,
But then, then he sang really well. So, you
yeah.
know,
And we should mention there's a fair amount of material that Ricky recorded with Toiling Midgets, including the album Sea of Unrest from '82,
yeah,
which is a tour de force record, a classic of its time, and that's still available. What I'll do when I post this video is I'll put your links up, because you have done a tremendous job of being an archivist for the band, and you have various releases and demos and live recordings.
yeah.
There's a real world for people to discover if they're new to your music and what you and Paul have done over the years. So you work with Ricky. Perhaps unsurprisingly, you then go back to doing instrumentals. You and Ricky kind of part
Well,
ways. See about
we
that.
did do the 4-track Mind cassette first
Okay.
before we parted ways with Ricky. And that was interesting too, because we were moving a bit away from the rock band approach, more into a pure studio thing with Ricky, using some synths, using some processing, fucking around with stuff. And that record actually has just been re-released on the Italian label Improved Sequence as a LP.
Oh, really?
Yeah, when I get some, I'm getting that and the live show from 1990 with Eitzel is also been released as an LP. I'm getting 2 boxes in the next month or so.
Oh,
I will
cool.
send, I will send you a copy of each one.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to hear that stuff.
Yeah,
Didn't
yeah. We actually played a festival in Bologna that the label was doing, and they just put out the Distorted Pony LP. They re-released it.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
And yeah, they just did a festival. Lydia Lunch played the festival. Kid Congo played the festival. Perubu was supposed to open the festival, and we were supposed to open for them in Bologna, but then they canceled their whole tour because of health reasons. So yeah, but yeah, but then yeah, we parted ways with Ricky simply because Ricky, yeah. Then back to instrumental, yes, yes, and we did that for a little while, and then we kind of broke up. Well, after we went back to instrumental, and then we added Annie Unger from Gun Club on guitar. So we had three guitars for a while.
Mhm.
Her playing slide. We did some recording with her. And then we kind of broke up for a while because, uh, everybody's taking too many drugs, doing too much stupid shit, you know, and everybody need to go their separate ways for a while. And then in the meantime, Thermidor put out a bunch of stuff as demos, and then some of the recordings with Annie as the Deadbeats LP, which actually I wanted it to be an EP, but they wanted an LP, so that's why there's that other stuff on there.
Right, right.
Couple
Yeah.
things, Sea of Unrest outtakes, alternative versions, and then the the uh the stuff recorded with Annie.
Mm. And unfortunately, as the story unfolds, there are people who come in and out of the band who aren't with us anymore. And Annie's another one, sadly, who's passed on.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, once you know, we got back together in the late 90s, and with it was Tim Mooney, me and Paul, and then Lisa Davis playing bass. And we started doing some recording, and we recorded some demos, and Mark Eitzel wanted to sing with us for some reason, try some singing with us, which I was okay with. That was more Mooney's thing because he's close to the AMC people.
Mhm.
But then we did those recordings, and Matador heard that and wanted to do the LP. So
And that's
that
the Sun album from 93,
91.
91. Pardon me.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, it was a good record. Unfortunately, we never really got to tour it. It came out at the same time as the Pavement record, so it kind of got put on the back burner while Pavement took off.
Hmm.
And Eitzel didn't want to tour with us, so it's really hard to support a record with the singer on it. The singer doesn't want to sing on.
Hmm.
So yeah. Uh, so then then it was back to instrumental.
Right. And we should mention, for those who don't know, AMC is American Music Club, which was Mark's band. And Tim, of course, was with them for a while, and Joe Goldring as well, who was in the Midgets, was part of that, and Swans and some other stuff. And AMC had a moment there for a couple of years. I really do like some of those records.
Yeah.
And I thought, looking, I wasn't tuned in at that time to the Midgets, but I like that record. I think he did a good job on that record. I think, if you're going to get somebody who isn't Ricky, he's probably the one to get
Yeah.
sing. But I guess it wasn't, meant to be beyond the first album
Yeah,
together.
I mean, and then when they came back, I mean, we did a tour, and when we got back, Joe and Tim left. Tim left to join AMC and stuff, and that's when Malin joined as the drummer, and we got Eric Werner to start playing bass, and then Malin got Mark Sullivan from Mr. Lucky to play keyboards. So that pretty much stayed like that for the next 20 years.
Mm.
Well, until Tom died, anyways. So that was what 2014. So
And Eric was in the Blackouts in Seattle with Bill Rieflin. Uh,
yes,
History,
Yeah.
Big Plays, a bunch of bands. Um,
Yeah, I mean, Eric started in Seattle in a band called the Telepaths. And then when they moved to the East Coast, they became the Blackouts. And then I think the Blackouts, mostly without Eric, the Blackouts without Eric became Ministry. They just
right,
added Jorgensen.
right.
So yeah, Eric played bass with us for a while. He's mainly a guitar player, but he played bass with us. Yeah, I mean, we just kept doing it. I always I always liked the instrumental thing the most, simply because too often when people sing with us, we end up being the backing band, which I'm not interested in, you know.
Right.
That's the thing about working with Ricky was you never felt like the backing band. You felt like Ricky was, just another instrument up there, and he didn't have the kind of ego that wanted lots of attention. Yes, he wanted lots of attention, but not the kind of attention of like rock star attention, more like, oh, take care of me because I'm a fuck up attention, you know. Yeah. So yeah, it was but then yeah, we did that. But after we started playing with no, actually, yeah. When did that happen before? So before Mooney split and stuff, but he went on tour with AMC. Um, Malling suggested we do some recording with Ricky
Mm.
because Ricky was uh he had an ankle bracelet on for some reason, but he wasn't on any drug. He wasn't taking lots of drugs and stuff, and he was in pretty good shape. And so Malin decided he would play drums. I was going to play acoustic guitar. Mary Redfield, who was in the band Wade with Joe Goldring, playing violin or viola, and then Joe would play acoustic guitar and bass. And then Paul would do what Paul does, make little funny noises in the corner. Um, and we recorded that just so it would have been just before Sun came out, while AMC were on tour in Europe with Mooney, and then they got back, and then we went on tour. That's right. But that recording, man, that's the one that would have, if it had come out at the time that it was recorded, I think it would have really done something.
Now, is that the recording that came out years later as Little Ricky?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I did a review of that record when you
Yeah,
put it.
yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, you did. I mean, imagine if that had come out in like 91,
Yeah,
when it was recorded. If people would have gone, what the fuck? Where'd this come from? But it didn't. It didn't come out till much later when nobody was paying any attention. So, but yeah, I mean, that kind of thing. I try not to dwell on those things, because coulda, woulda, shoulda again. But man, motherfucker. It's like, motherfucker. Wow. Wow. Yeah. Why not take a shitty singer? But yeah, but anyways, we recorded that stuff. Then we went on tour, and then Mooney and Goldring quit. And oh yeah, I mean, all these weird little things happened in that time. Like we did two different shows with Ricky, one with Tom Allen playing the drums and all those people. And actually, yeah, and there's a cassette recording of that somewhere. And then I actually released this a little while ago. One in Oakland with Ricky singing, with Mooney and Goldring playing with us.
mm.
And I think that was one of the last times played with Ricky. Because someone told me he'd been out in the parking lot smoking crack just before we played. So, oh, awesome, Ricky. Great. But yeah, so and that was all just before we touring and breaking up. It's all kind of mixed up back then because we were doing a lot of things. I know Eitzel was getting mad because Ricky was singing with us. Um, yeah, yeah, it was all a bit stupid and silly, and but you know, good music came out of it. Whatever happened, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And we should, Mooney, we lost him a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Um, and Aaron Gregory as well, we should mention, former
Aaron,
bass. Uh,
yeah, Aaron, we split ways with Nosmo in like late 82, and we got Aaron Gregory, who was an old friend of Paul's, to start playing bass. And he's actually the 4-track mind cassette. That's all Aaron's doing. He gathered the cassettes together and compiled it. But yeah, he was with us for yeah, he was actually the bass player through all the last sessions, on all the Annie stuff. That's right. He was playing when Annie was playing and stuff. And it wasn't until much later in his life that he got into all the drugs and stuff. All the rest of us were the ones into the drugs. So, but yes, Aaron is gone. Yes, Tom's gone. Tim Mooney is gone. Annie's gone. Um, yeah, and then negative trend. We got Will's gone and Rick's gone. Yeah, so one or two.
I commend you for making so much material available. For that reason, because a lot of these people aren't here, but we
Yeah,
can listen to them every day. You know what I
yeah.
mean? And we can listen to what made them great. And I'm always impressed with just the level of music you have available for the band. There's so much to kind of choose from and dive into. Um, I've always been curious when I listen to Toiling Midgets. I know, first of all, I know I'm listening to you because you sound like no other band I can think of. Um,
Well,
but
that's always been my intention, but thank you for that.
well, it's interesting because you yourself, of course, and Paul. There have been so many great musicians in the band. Tim Mooney,
Yeah,
that I think you all could have very easily gone, I don't know, the REM route,
yeah.
and like very kind of accessible alternative music. But you went the Toiling Midgets route instead, which personally I think is infinitely more interesting, but doesn't necessarily translate to, record sales. And so, you've been at this for a long time. What keeps you and what kept you for years on the path that you guys were doing, knowing that there may have been another path that would have made it a little bit easier, maybe not as creatively rewarding, but easier. Why stick on? I mean, thank God you did, but I've always been curious, why did you stay that course, putting out this music that is so original and sometimes challenging when you're all very capable of doing something else?
Well, it's back to what I said earlier that people forget music is an art,
Yeah.
and that my approach to it, and I'm heavily influenced as a teenager by bands like Roxy Music and stuff that brought the whole thing of the art world into music, into popular music in a much more unconventional way, so to speak. But that it is an art, and that I'm much more interested in the art of it than the commerce of it.
Right.
And even though I'd love the commerce to catch up with me, it just hasn't happened. We've always been the band that guys in other bands, like people in other bands, go, "Oh, you guys were great," but the audience didn't seem to know what was going on, And yes, okay, great. Well, thank you guys, and yes, I noticed the audience was just standing there slack jawed, staring at us like, "What's going on?" But that's okay because then they're going to go home and go, "What did I just see?
Mm-hmm.
Did I just see? What did I just hear?" So that was, and the reaction we were getting in Europe was an art reaction. People were saying things like the edge, avant-garde, unusual, those things, and that's, to me, in the long run, that's going to be more valuable to my ego than money is, to just because that in the long run, that's why I do it. Because and that's why I have to do it. I have to do it. I wouldn't be alive if I wasn't doing it. I don't really have a choice in the matter. Even if I sit around and try not to do it, there's this thing in my brain going, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Why aren't you downstairs making a racket? Because that's, you never know what you can find. And so yeah, I have to do it. It's and I couldn't do it any other way. I've tried playing in other people's less commercial things. I tried it a little bit a couple times, and no, man, I just don't feel. I feel like I feel like I'm not telling the truth, and that's also important for me. Is on stage musically, or I mean, music is to be telling the truth about. It's not, this isn't this is the truth about me here. This music that I'm telling you, you want to know about me? You want to know the truth about me? Listen.
Yes.
You will hear it all right here. So yeah, I mean, the art of it and the truthfulness of it are the things that keep me going on. And I just, I love making music, man. Just, what's better? What's better? I haven't figured that part out yet.
I don't know either. And yeah, I definitely get everything you're saying, and that always comes through on those records, and you've always been incredibly kind in sending me the latest stuff you're doing. And I always know now a Lazy Giants record, but I always know a Toiling Midgets record was going to take me somewhere I wouldn't go any other way. Like I always look forward to it. Like, where's he going to go now? Where are they going to go now with this? And I always appreciated the fact that the band kind of really did its own thing. I can't think of another band that sounds like what you guys have done. I mean, yeah, I could say the Sleepers because obviously Ricky was the singer, okay, but beyond that, I can't find a proper comparison for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we ran across that a bit on tour with interviews. Interviewers for a lot of interviewers forever being lazy, going, so what do you kind of band do you guys think you are? It's like, really, isn't that it's like, rock band? I don't know, man. We're a band. I perception is not my deal. Presentation is, dude. Perception's your deal. So I always have a difficult time with that. It's like but I too have yet to hear someone where I go, oh, I think they sound like us. I've heard bands where I go, oh, I think they might have heard our record before. I've heard bands like that, but I haven't heard anybody that was my contemporary or precursor that sounded like us, or a band that has, you know, but another interesting thing about adding these young guys is like actual Daniel Cherny. He really likes the 4-track mind stuff, and which made me think, yeah, there's a direction we started, but we never really fully explored. So that's a great thing about having these people is they take you and go, oh, there's some ideas you had. Why don't we take those further?
Right.
Which is awesome because I'm always, like I said earlier, I'm not a big play the last stuff you did, play the stuff from 20 years ago. I'm the stuff from, well, I wrote this new thing, let's do that.
Right.
Let's do a whole new show where nobody's ever heard anything where you're going to play. I'm fine with that, but a lot of people are like, well, you should probably play a couple songs off your record. It's like, oh yeah, right, okay, sure, okay, I'll do that. We haven't played them that much. So yeah. So, which is, and when so much music played by older dudes is just the music they were playing when they were younger dudes, it's hard to be an older band playing new music,
Mm,
because so few do, you know. Once in a while you'll hear, well, didn't Jesus and Mary Chain just do a new single?
yeah,
But but they're not really trying to do anything new or anything. They're just, another new Jesus and Mary Chain single with that tempo and
right.
that voice. So yeah, so that's just also difficult. I mean, I'm sure if I got together a band that played Sea of Unrest and toured it, I could do okay, you know. But I would hate it, you know. I mean, that's kind of how I felt like doing the Negative Trend reunion. It's like I I wrote these songs when I was 19. And we played Gilman Street, and a lot of the kids weren't into it because it wasn't fast enough. You're doing like what are basically rock and roll songs,
Right.
and they grew up on hardcore.
I'm glad you mentioned a reunion because that did come up, what
Yeah.
was it, 2008 around there?
2008 through 2010. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost together longer than Negative Trend was.
And that was
But
you and Pace who put that
well,
together.
DePace started the idea, and then the guy who was singing with us wanted to take it on further. And DePace couldn't handle playing even 6 songs that fast after so many years of playing flipper. So and he didn't have time to do a couple of shows. So we got Tony Sales Jr. to play drums for a while. But yeah, I mean, that was, I don't know. I wasn't happy doing it. It was, I couldn't relate to the songs. It seemed, it almost seemed silly. I mean, people showed up to see shows, and I was like, wow, weird. But that's probably just me and my attitude towards these things. Uh, but it was just going nowhere. It had no uh, future other than to be nostalgia act, which not interested, just not interested, man. You know, even though I go see bands like that, I'll go see bands. Oh yeah, yeah, I'll go see. I mean, actually, I went and saw when I was in Berlin. In this Pointed Sticks were on tour in Europe, and I went and saw them. I went to high school with those guys, so it was. But they're still playing all their old songs. But yeah, that's what you expect from them. So, but yeah, it was yeah. Anyways,
Yeah.
so yeah, so back to the point. Yes, it's I play it because I have to.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Understand that completely. Um, I want to kind of, bring it back to the present and the fact that you're working with someone, Paul Hood,
Yeah,
who you've had a 40 plus year creative partnership,
yeah.
which is extraordinarily rare. Just knowing somebody that long, getting along with somebody for that long is a rare thing. What
We're
makes
just like every old couple. We bitch and moan at each other all the time.
musically, what what makes it work? What does the combination provide you each that you wouldn't get from another person in that picture?
Well, okay. I mean, this is the way I look at it. It's hard to, I mean, it's always about other people's perceptions, but my perception is I'm a very structured player. I write very structured things. I play very structured things. Paul, exact opposite, totally loose. Comes from improvisational background. I too can improvise, but I improvise in a very structured way. I improvise riffs or little bits, whereas he just improvises whole soundscapes. But so in my structured thing, Paul's guitars are just going in and out of those structures perfectly. I mean, adding sounds and harmonies and instances that don't happen any other way or between any other people. we seem to be opposite sides of the same coin,
Hmm.
to speak, you know. I'm the polished side, he's the rough side. He's yeah. So you know, and it just works. It has since we first started playing together. You know, it's just pure chance. We both, you know, both being huge Mick Ronson fans as teenagers, and him going, you know, much more into the sounds and the feedback and stuff, and me much more into the tone and this, you know, a combination of Bowie songwriting and Ronson's playing. But yeah, you know, and his playing to my songs has always been fantastic, you know. And then me playing because and he, you know, he's doing more writing, and so that frees me up a lot to actually do some more interesting playing and things. So, and I think the next single, which we has there's no plans for it yet, but we recorded it in Hamburg uh, uh, in the middle of the tour.
Hmm.
It will actually have one of Paul's songs on it. So yeah, we actually did some. We recorded in Hamburg. Or we recorded two singles at because the studio in Hamburg, and then we did a live multi-track recording of second to last show of the tour. So
Hmm.
I'm also working on that. Was also filmed and stuff. So yeah.
Cool.
So
I love the fact that you're out touring in support of an album, but while you're touring, you do new recordings. I think that's great.
yeah. No, you know, I don't understand why bands just don't fucking the first thing they do when they finish touring is going to the studio because they're never going to be tighter. You know, they may hate each other by that point, but those tensions are great in a recording studio. You know, because those add the you know someone's always got to have someone who's in a bit of a bad mood. So there's a bit of a tension because you need that. If everyone's too relaxed, then sometimes the playing just doesn't have friction. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know how else to describe it. You know, it's just that thing when everybody's emotions are up and you're playing and you all get to that place because everyone's emotions are up, you know, and that happened a couple of times. But yeah, so yeah, I'm always interested in doing new things, man. You know, I'm really excited about working on the next record. You know,
Hmm.
got a lot of it written already. Well, a lot of it. I've got a few songs, anyways, and since the studio is only literally out the front door and downstairs, makes it very easy. So I'm very excited about that.
I'm excited to hear it as always. I love the fact that 46 years into it, you're active still and you're producing not something that you would have done in 77. You're doing things now.
Yeah.
And I think that's so inspiring that you're not going out and playing the hits, so to speak. It's
If I
let's
had any,
um so
so
I
I was thinking of making a worst stuff record because you know
the
I
worst
had
stuff.
how about best stuff.
Yeah, the worst of Toiling Midgets or
Yeah,
Lazy Midgets.
yeah, yeah. You know, and I mean, cancel culture. I mean, yeah, I never thought in my life I'd get hit by cancel culture, but it started happening. And it started in Portland of all places.
Hmm.
Yeah. They actually told us, no, you should have changed your name 40 years ago. It's like,
Yeah.
dude, seriously? You mean before you were born to be offended by it?
That's right.
Okay.
Well, I know you've got
I
a Facebook page for Lazy Giants.
yeah,
There's all various Bandcamp links, which I will include in this video when I post it. So, and I would encourage anybody watching this to really take a deep dive into Craig's stuff. Go on the Toiling Midgets Bandcamp and the website, check out the Lazy Giant stuff. And of course, if you're new to Negative Trend, you've got to go back and listen to that stuff too, because it's as much as I like the past and I recommend it. Lazy Giants are doing amazing stuff in the here and now. So just check it all out. If you're new to it, and give Craig's work a listen. It's always been fantastic stuff.
Well, thank you, Joel. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you doing this. I've wanted to do this for a long time. I know we've had some chats over the years that were meant to, be certain things, and because of my end didn't work out. So I'm glad that we are able to connect this way and help share the story, through this method. So
Have you been able to read that book, the Who Cares Anyways book? You
I
know
have
that book?
not yet. I need to. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That guy's in he's on the East Coast. He works at some school on the East Coast. He's a professor of some professor of bullshit. I don't know. He's professor of something.
Yeah, he's actually on my Facebook. I gotta track that stuff down.
Yeah.
Um, I find myself having creative ADD a lot of the time. I'll get working on something and then something else will pull me away. But I'm definitely in 2024, one of my goals is to actually finish the 3 books that I've yet to finish. One of which is the one on Rick, which is what initially got us in touch
Yeah, yeah.
almost 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I remember the house I was living in even. Yeah. I was living in Canada then too. That's right. Yeah, I just moved back then. Oh wow. Yeah. Huh. Canada. Huh. Yeah. It's what it is. Yeah, Germany. Oh my God. It's kind of scary, man. The AfD is doing really well there. It's, right wing parties. Yeah. The German, yeah, fucking Nazis, man. They're coming back.
Yeah. Well, that's another reason why I want to kind of just work on books next year. I'll
Yeah.
do some of these videos too, but I need to get away from the world for a while because I think, in the States next year, what's coming. It's going to be a bad scene. So I'm going to like,
Is it ever? And trouble with Canada is I can't get away from out here either. Even in Europe, it was hard to get away from just because he's on the news all over the world, that motherfucker. But it was a little bit easier. But then they got their own problems with their own right wing bullshit going on there now too. And who would have figured that the German train system is the laughing stock of Europe now? You know, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Trains in Germany are not good, not good. So yeah, yeah. It was educational being there for that long. Very educational.
hmm,
Yeah.
what do you
Yeah.
guys have planned perhaps for 2024 in terms of
Well,
and
um, working on the record. One of the Daniels is going to be coming over here in April for us to do some work. Then we're looking at possible West Coast in the summer, depending on a couple of sessions. We're working on some radio sessions, and maybe Europe again in the fall of 24, but we got to have a couple discussions first. But mainly getting that next record done so that we could go out and tour that one. So
well, keep me in mind about West Coast stuff because I might be spending some time in LA in the summer next year.
okay.
I might be staying. You know Paul Rossler from the Screamers, I'm sure.
I know of him, and I probably met him way back when, but yeah. I mean, the first time I saw the Screamers, it what's it? Brown was still in him. What's his name?
Oh, Dave Brown.
Yeah, Dave Brown. Yeah, it was pre Paul Rossler, so it was I think
Yeah.
that was yeah. I did.
No,
Go ahead.
no, I was going to say I may be staying with Paul for a bit in the summer um, out there in LA. So if you happen to make it out there, let me know because it might be, you know,
Okay.
I
Yeah,
may actually try to book my trip out there around your tour if it come that
yeah.
way.
We should know about that in the next couple of weeks. Oh yeah, yeah. We're not. we haven't, yeah. I mean, we're still putting together all the assets from the tour because we got the recordings, the video, all that stuff. Got to put that all together because we're also looking for a decent booking agent because the last tour was DIY, and I don't want to do that again. I'm getting too old for that kind of crap. But yeah, but we did play some really cool places. And yeah, we you heard of a band called the Devils from Naples?
I
It's
haven't.
they're a duo. It's a female drummer and then a guitar player who looks like Elvis from Hell. They're on Go Down Records. Yeah, well, we played with them at this villa in the Italian countryside in an old church. It was just fucking amazing. But they weren't bad. They were okay. It's kind of like Led Zeppelin meets Motorhead by two people.
Huh.
Yeah, it was pretty. Yeah, yeah, they're not bad, and they were really nice people too. But it was yeah, it was at a villa in the Italian countryside. And you're just going, who the fuck's gonna come to this? And all of a sudden, everybody shows up from God knows where. And there you go. Yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Excellent.
and yeah, I'm just recovering still. Like so I've been home 2 weeks. Yeah, it's hard when you're 65 to do that shit. Not as easy when you were young, unfolding yourself from a car and unloading gear every day and shit. So it's like, oh, yeah, my knees, my back. Oh my God. Yeah. But it was a hell of a lot of fun, as always. As long as I'm playing every night, I don't give a shit where it is. But yeah, just good.
Well, like I said, I love the new record. I'm always so happy to check out what you're doing, and I'm glad the band's active and doing well. And I'm so happy we connected for this.
Yeah, yeah.
It's been a really nice chat.
No, it's awesome, dude. Finally,
Yeah.
man.
Let's plan on doing a part two one of these days.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe we can do it in person in LA.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. We'll definitely stay in touch on that for sure.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, cool, cool. All right. Well, I will definitely keep you in the loop about what we're up to and what's going on.
Excellent.
And yeah, yeah. Just yeah, and let me know when the video goes up and all that shit. You know.
Absolutely. Until we talk again, Craig,
All
enjoy
right.
the rest of your evening and Happy New Year and all that fun stuff. And we'll be in
Oh
touch
yeah.
again soon.
All right, dude. All right. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye bye.